At this point, people have seen this chart of like the circular deals that are happening between all these companies that are like doing AI. So there's this guy named Masayoshi-san, and he caused this WeWork thing that happened a few years ago. If you recall, it went to $47 billion in value, right? And then now it's basically back to zero. This is his whole MO, is like being at the peak of the bubble and inflating it as much as possible and then losing everyone's money. People said at the time that he lost his credibility and lost all of his money and like this wouldn't happen again. Well, something else he did about the same time was buying ARM, and he paid 32 billion for it. It was only worth 20. This was a publicly traded company. He bought the whole company. He did it using debt, right? So this 32 billion was in the form of a loan for a company that was only worth 20 billion. And so then he sold a small amount of the shares, less than 10% of the shares, to institutional investors and an even smaller number to the public markets. The major shareholders now is him with 90%, and then institutional investors like Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs own most of the rest of it, and then a small number of shares are in the public markets. And the prices that those institutional investors were willing to pay set the value of the rest of the shares, of which this guy owns 90%. And so his 30 becomes 60, just like magic, right? But that was all debt funded, right? So now what he's doing is he's taking out loans on the rest of the shares that he still owns, which again, he paid for with loans. And what is he doing with the original 13 billion that he borrowed against these shares and now this additional 5 billion? Keep in mind, that's more than the company was worth, is what he's now borrowed against the shares, which he paid for with other debt, right? So he's borrowed double what the company was originally worth. What is he doing with that money? He's investing in OpenAI. And he isn't even big enough with that deal to be on this chart. So he took a company, one of the most popular companies in the world, bought it with a loan, borrowed double what it was worth, and is putting that money into this bubble. The guy who did the same thing with WeWork and turned it into a essentially worthless company.